Hey there, and welcome to Season 4 of Stories Unveiled, the podcast where we believe every story has the power to inspire, connect, and transform. Whether it's through the mundane moments or the life-altering tragedies, we highlight God's story on display in our lives. Each episode, our guests get real and dive into their own personal journey, where we hold hardship in one hand and hope in the other, while exploring where Jesus is in the messy middle. I'm Ashley Sears, and I'm so glad you're here. Hey, it's Ashley here at Stories Unveiled. Before we dive into this episode, I want to personally invite you to our upcoming annual Fall Women's Conference. This is your chance to experience the power of real, life-changing stories, just like the ones here on every episode, brought to life in person. Join us for a full day of hope, inspiration, and connection, featuring incredible regional and local speakers and a moving keynote session, plus amazing uplifting worship. Connect with amazing community partners and browse our curated vendor booths. Don't miss this opportunity to gather, grow, and be encouraged by stories of hope at this fall's Stories Unveiled conference. Register now at storiesunveiledconference.com. We can't wait to see you there. This podcast was a live recording of a streamed video chat. Due to streaming variables, please excuse any inconsistencies in this recording. Ashley Jameson has been on staff at Pure Desire Ministries since 2015. In her own story, she has experienced teen pregnancy, sex and love addiction, and betrayal trauma. Unafraid to tackle difficult topics, Ashley advocates for the voiceless and creates safe spaces for honest and vulnerable conversations within the Christian community. Ashley is a certified pastoral sex addiction professional and is a contributing author to Unraveled, Betrayal Beyond, and Authentically You. She also just released her first solo book titled Girl Talk, a guide to help moms and daughters have honest conversations about sex. Thank you so much for being here, Ashley.
I feel honored to be here with you.
Yeah. Your book, Girl Talk, that is your first solo book. Is that correct?
It is my first solo book, yes.
That's amazing. What an incredible resource for moms and daughters to have to authentically talk about sex.
Yeah, I'm really excited. John Fort from Be Broken Ministries actually has a book called Father-Son Accountability. It's right here. Yeah, Father-Son Accountability. And he does a lot of homeschool conventions and whatnot. So he said he had a lot of women and moms saying, where's the female version? So he asked if I'd be willing to write something. And I was like, yeah, I think I can do that. And it was really cool to write it and just get something out. Because as you know, it fits right into what we do at Pure Desire. And since I started writing it a couple of years ago, we've had lots of moms asking what there is. So I'm very, very excited to put it out there.
That's awesome. Well, that kind of just fits right into, I feel like, your story as a whole, and just this idea of being able to have healthy conversations around sex and what that looks like. And so I kind of want to start in your story, first telling me a little bit about your background and your upbringing as a kid. Did you grow up in church? Did you have any type of faith background growing up?
Yes. I grew up in church, but my family didn't go to church other than my older sister. And we went with, we would get picked up by the bus, little Baptist church gave us candy and stuff, and totally get in the van with the person giving us candy. Yes, we did.
Okay.
And we found Jesus. So thankfully, but we would ride the bus, and she had some friends at school that, had a family that went to church, and they'd bring her along, and then I tagged along. So I was baptized at 8 years old, but I distinctly remember, and I've always loved the Lord. My mom's a believer, I'm quoting, but she never went to church or anything like that growing up. And so, yeah, I love the Lord in my heart. I love going to church. I I bought my own Bible. I still have it. It's 30-year-old Bible.
That's awesome.
And I just kind of explored my faith on my own, which is part of my problem with not knowing how to integrate that into real life, and why I'm really passionate about what I do now.
Okay, that's awesome. So In your introduction, I said that you were pregnant as a teenager, and you have walked through sexual brokenness, love addiction, but you've also experienced betrayal trauma. I kind of want to tackle all of those things. I know it's a lot, and they probably all somehow piece together and stand alone all at the same time. And so tell me a little bit about that, whatever piece you want to start, whatever makes the most sense.
Yeah. So that lonely background of like, it all started in childhood, so my dad was like an addict of all kinds and out of the house. So I think they divorced when I was like 2. And my mom, worked all the time. She's very smart and was just always out of the house working. And so I was left to being exposed to sexual things. I grew up in a really racist community. And so I was called all kinds of derogatory racial slurs. And that created such a sense of loneliness and a feeling of being desperate to feel loved and wanted at all cost. So when I was raped as a virgin at 14, it created this weird fork in the road for me of like, I ruined my chance to have a good Christian husband. I am disqualified from God's best because I heard in church that you have to be a virgin and that's the best gift you can give your husband. And so I was like, well, I guess I will never have an honest Christian husband. And then at the same time, I felt weirdly pursued. Like, oh, somebody does actually like me. It doesn't matter that I'm Black. It doesn't matter that I'm always home alone. Like somebody likes me in a twisted way. And so, that led to a year of sexually acting out. And looking back, I realized there was moments of being in uncomfortable situations with boys and never being taught how to navigate those. And so I would do something to like take control so that I didn't become a victim again. And then in other instances, I wanted love or pursued acceptance and was willing to do anything sexually to get that. And so then around 16, I met some Christians and I was like, oh, I want to be in the light. Like they are in the light. I want to shine like the stars. I saw them. I was like, I want what they have, And so I decided to go back to church and I could drive at that time. And like I said, my faith was kind of my own. I bought myself a Bible. I went to church and I said, this is my new life. This is my new identity. I want to be in church. For the next year, I became, I was on the worship team. I was a camp counselor. I led Awana. I had totally dedicated my life to God. Then comes the purity messages. And I was like, it was that one time a year they talk about sexual purity and it's like all or nothing. You have this, you don't. I even remember being told my purity was like a cup of flour. And if you drop it, you can like put it back in the cup, but it will be dirty. Have debris in it. The 2 pieces of paper, you're like 2 pieces of paper that glue together. And then you're like all holy. And I'm like, okay, there is some truth in that we bond chemically. There is, but you are not left being a ragged, holy piece of paper. God can do more with you than that. But that message, and then hearing the teenagers and youth group talking about people who had done those things, I was so afraid of being exposed and humiliated. I was like, I'm not going to risk this. I would rather just have control of how this relationship with the church ends, and I'm going to remove myself. And so I went back into the world and started partying again. And my friends there, I'm like, well, they at least know me. They know that I love God and they still let me party with them. I can be both versions of myself in this world. Yeah. I can't be both versions of myself in this world. And so I started partying again. I quit going to church. And then I got pregnant my senior year of high school. And so, yes, now my boys are just about 22.
You didn't just, you got pregnant with twins.
Yes, I got pregnant with twins. And when they were 5 months, when I was 5 months pregnant, I was in a psychology class because I was doing classes at the college. And I read that they could hear me. And so I stopped cussing and I went back to church when I was 5 months pregnant because I wanted my boys to hear God and not cussing. And so I was plugged into church once I had them, but then I had to navigate the shame of being a mom in the church with 2 babies. It started this pattern of a binge purge cycle of once a year, I'd kind of fall off the wagon and end up going out to the bar or hooking up with somebody. And then I'd be like, God, I don't know why I'm doing that. Take this away from me. Why do I have this desire? And I would hold that in, but then something else like an eating disorder or OCD would pop out. And so like, now I know I never got to the root of it. I was just holding it in and something else was coming out. And then when my twins were 4, I met my husband in one of my off the wagon moments at the bar. And I really feel like God was like, you need to go get that girl because she is out of control. So we have been married 16 years and we have our own story of betrayal and, navigating that. But that's kind of what led me up to marrying John. And I did end up marrying the twins' dad briefly for a year or two, but it was really toxic. And the reason why I even married him was I thought I got so much flack about being an unwed mother. And so I was like, okay, I better do what's right or I'm going to go to hell and they're not going to accept me in the church. And that really wasn't the right thing either.
No, I never recommend getting married because you got pregnant or because you feel like it's the next right step. However, that is also my story. I got pregnant. My current husband, Asher, and I were dating and I got pregnant and it was like the next, well, I guess we're doing this. Actually, it's funny, hindsight, we joke about it now, but I didn't really have much choice in the matter. My dad said, you will marry her. And my husband said, okay. And he came home that afternoon and said, so we're getting married on Friday. And I was like, what? And I never got a proposal, nothing. It was like, well, this is what we're doing. And so because insurance and because it, like who was going to want an unwed single mom and like, it was just the next right thing to do. And unfortunately for some, it doesn't work out the way that it has for my husband. And I am so grateful we'll celebrate 20 years this summer. And so it has worked out. But, even at the time, like Asher was not a Christ follower. I grew up in the church, but was not walking with the Lord. And so, we were just both kind of floundering and everybody's story kind of works out a little different, but God knows what he's doing. I guess we'll just say that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, he does. And, I also don't recommend it at all. I didn't know that was part of your story. So, I always say, oh, that's kind of cool to know about you because I do love when people just have these really rough parts of their story that obviously that they're not still in and suffering, but it brings a level of depth to the experience of just knowing what that feels like and having been there.
Yeah. So you ultimately, married John as your husband and you've been married 16 years. You guys have 2 kids together.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
So you have 4.
Yes.
And talk to me a little bit about, because you had said you have some betrayal in your story. And so obviously John's story is his story. I know in Pure Desire and in the realm in which we do ministry, even though our ministries are different, they're kind of the same in their own right, without necessarily sharing our spouse's story, but it really is our it's part of our story too. And so talk to me a little bit about that piece of your guys' marriage and that betrayal piece for you.
Yeah. And I always tell John, like, you're my best content. Like this you're my best source for great content because this last Pure Desire Summit, I did a session on spiritual bypassing, gaslighting, having boundaries. And that was written on the heels of a relapse, a relapse years down the road. And I know that it helped so many couples to realize we still need some of these tools even in our recovery. And so, John, he's good with his story out there. He's still working on it. But so 4 years into our marriage, I married him. I did not think I was going to get married again or have other kids. I'm like, I'm good. God had another plan. He's like, you're actually not good. You need you need marriage. The girl needs marriage. So I got married 7 months after our first date. Like, it was a quick marriage. It was quick. You know, he had been married once before, and his marriage ended in a divorce within a year because of an affair, and hit on him. He had an affair. And so we got married. I brought my boys into his life. It was the first man I'd ever brought, you know, around them like that. And it seemed good. It was like, okay, you have a spotted past. I have a spotted past. We both want to have a family and raise them in the ways of the Lord. This seems like it's going to be perfect. And to us, that relationship was the healthiest either of us had ever had, especially because my husband has a few year past with prostitutes and drugs and an affair and all of that. So like being married to one person and me not like all over the place, we're like, yeah, this is good. We're really healthy.
Look at us. We are doing so well.
We're so healthy. And so we just didn't realize, I know I didn't realize all those other things, like that I had trauma, that I had trust issues, that I still was struggling in my eating habits, all of that. And John was still struggling with porn secretly, thinking that marriage would fix it. And about 4 years into our marriage, I was telling God, I'm like, something is off. Like, you either have to help me to trust him or reveal whatever's going on. And God's like, okay, like I'm going to reveal whatever's going on. So I ended up finding his new work phone and tons of porn on it. And it was so devastating especially because I mean, it's devastating on its own. You married somebody that you think you know who they are, and then you realize that's not the version that they are when you're not around. And that feels so gross to know that your husband is like, it almost makes me think like, okay, I shut the door and I go out of town with my kids and he's just like, she's gone, and all the nastiness comes out. But then on top of my past of feeling like this is the first time I tried to do it right. This is the first time I thought that I had enough value and worth to end up with a Christian husband. And I was wrong. Like, joke's on me. I'm still not good enough. I'm still not like all those other Christian men and women that have this perfect Christian marriage, which we know is not true all the time. Right. But that's how I felt. And it was I didn't realize I was going through trauma, but I found out in June of 12 or 13 years ago, whatever year that was. I found out in that June. And then he's a wildland firefighter. So he's practically gone all summer. Like, I think there was a 12-day stretch where I didn't even talk to him at all. And that summer I did everything that the church told me to do. I called the elders in my church and I'm like, I am a mess. I don't know what's wrong with me. And they were like, read your Bible, pray the armor of God over you.
Pray harder.
Are you sure you're forgiving him? And I did all the things. I read the whole Bible that summer. Like, I was reading 50 to 70 chapters a day. Like, that's all I was doing, was reading my Bible. I canceled social media. I stopped drinking wine, like for years, not just like for a moment. And I still was just a mess, like holding it all in, lashing out at my kids. I was so angry at my kids. And so when toward the end of the summer, I'm like, this isn't working. And I started praying that God would just bring us something else that would work, because I did not see a life with him in that way. But I also didn't want to bring my kids through another divorce. And at that time I had 4 kids. Yeah. And then John got a call to transfer to a new city. And so we transferred, and I said, okay, we're moving into our new house on a Saturday, and we're not going to fall off the wagon of going to church. So we're going to that church down the street on Sunday. And the first day we sat down, it was Rodney, who's now a board member.
My good friend, Rodney.
Yeah, our good friend, Rodney. It was him saying, hey, we're starting this brand new thing. And it was just starting. And I was like, yes. So I told John, you have to do that. I don't care what you say. You have to do that if our marriage is going to even have a chance. He did that. And a few months later, I was still struggling. And in my mind, I'm like, why am I still struggling? If he's getting help, he's changing his ways, I'm still devastated. And that's when I realized I needed something. So I looked up this Pure Desire that he was doing, and I ordered the women's workbook, and I went through it, and I'm like, this is everything that's inside my head right now. How does this person know? I thought I was the only one experiencing this, and it was so unique to me. And unfortunately, it's not. So I called Rodney, the guy that was leading his group, and I said, hi, I'm brand new at your church. I want to set up a meeting to talk with you about something. So I did, and it just said, my husband's in one of your groups, and I think I need help as a spouse. Do you have somebody in this great big church that could lead this group? He's like, no. And I've been praying for somebody. And so I ended up starting groups out of my need in that church. So that was 12 years ago that was happening. We'll celebrate 16 years on May 30th of this month.
Okay. That's awesome. It's wild you talking, because you literally just shared our story, me and Asher's story. Yeah.
I don't know your story at all either. So that's
very, very much like somebody had brought Pure Desire to our church that we were already attending. And I was like, you should go to this. And actually at the time, I didn't know that he was still struggling. He very much painted a picture that it was in his rearview mirror. And but he was on the board. And so I said, you should lead by example. Nobody's going to be signing up for a sexual integrity group, right? Like nobody's going to be doing this. So like, you should go lead by example. Nobody really knows our story, but that's okay. I know you don't deal with this anymore, but you should go. And so he was like, okay, so he did. But what was wild is that this whole time I was like, this is a him issue. And when he starts to figure his junk out, like, we'll be fine. This is all your problem. Like, this is all you. Mm-hmm. And when he did start going and start getting help and seeing, like getting to the root of things and seeing hope for the first time, I was not okay. I was still not okay. And it didn't dawn on me until months into it, where I was like, oh, I need to figure my stuff out too. I was sexually assaulted. I was raped in my early 20s. And so I have like similar sort, and I hadn't dealt with a lot of things like at that point. And so it was like, oh, I guess I should probably get some help too. I guess I should probably dive into my own stuff too. And so, yeah, very similar.
So similar. Which is I mean, it's surprising. And then you also wonder how many wives like us have that personality to say, like, to keep moving things forward and then being like, oh, like when I was reading John's material, which I shouldn't have been, but when I was reading it, I'm like, why does half of this apply to me? Like, I'm not an addict. And then after Betrayal and Beyond, I was like, maybe I should go through my own stuff. And I was like, yes, this actually is kind of the answer to why I've just swapped troubles all these years.
Yeah. What an incredible full circle moment. I'm sure you've thought about this. I'm sure I'm not the first person to say this, but like the very curriculum and the very organization that helped at least start building some semblance of hope and healing in yourselves and in your marriage is the very organization that you work for, and not just work for, but you are a lead in. You are very involved in a high capacity, and you've co-written and helped contribute writing to Betrayal and Beyond, the very curriculum that you walked through, and Unraveled, which is newer, different than the 7 pillars, but there's just so many things that you've contributed to this organization, the very organization that you were like, help, we need help.
Yeah.
Have you thought about that?
I have, and I get a little emotional. Actually, in one of our most recent struggles, my husband and I was like, hey, maybe I need a little bit of support. And so I called a local counselor, and I get on, and she's like, oh, I know you, and I know the work you do. Just like, oh, okay. So can you use the work that I helped write to help me?
Oh my gosh.
Which I do know, like for me, I know it's more about just that support, that accountability. Somebody's intentionally saying, hey, where are you at? Are you using your tools? Because I have the tools in my pocket. I help write the tools.
You helped write the tools.
Yeah, I help create the tools because I know what people need. But as you were telling me that, it reminds me in the early, so Rodney, at the church, I started doing this group. I was a disaster. I didn't know what I was doing. And I saw that Dr. Ted and Diane were doing a conference in Post Falls, Idaho. And so I asked Rodney, hey, I think I should go to this. I mean, remember, I'm like brand new to the church. I don't know what I'm doing. And so he paid for me. It was like $50 at the time. And I went, and Diane did this little like lunchroom hour during the conference where you kind of go around and just say a little bit of your story and what you're doing. And at the time, the operations director was in that room. I didn't know that she had like honed in on me. And then a year later, I went to their second conference for me in Oregon. And I stepped out of the conference to go to the bathroom, and she was like, "You come here." And I was like, "Ah." And she said, "I have been trying to figure out how to get a hold of you and who you were since that other conference in Idaho, because Diane and Ted are getting to the point where they can't teach and travel and do these things anymore. And we need to start building up people to step in for them." And she's like, "And I thought about you." And the crazy thing is, the crazier thing is that a few months before that, when I was just like, why don't women know where this is? Like, I was going in the Hastings bookstore. Remember those?
I do remember Hastings.
Trying to find material, and you don't even know what you're looking for. Like, you don't even know what the name is, what it's called. It's different now with so many podcasts and social media and things like that. But back then it was really, really hard to find resources. And so when I went through it and I was like, why wasn't I given this kind of stuff in high school after I had my kids? I mean, like, this is so good. And I actually called Diane, and so unlike me, I was just a stay-at-home mom, not just, but you know what I mean? And, like, you know, college dropout, bankrupt, like mom. And I'm like, "Hi, my name is Ashley, and I lead groups in Idaho." And I left her this long message saying, "I don't even know why I'm calling you, but I think I need to do this as a living for the rest of my life. I don't even know where I'm starting." I left her this long message, and I had it on mute the whole time. So I was like, that's my sign. I'm not supposed to work for this ministry. And then that's what was so crazy is like, God was like, "Yes, you are." Because then I went to that next conference. She's like, "I've been trying to figure out how to get a hold of you." And I hit the ground running at then. I think I did my first conference, you know, in place for Diane only 1 year after I started groups at that church. And I still was in my own healing, but they just had so much faith in me. And so, yeah, here I am. I'll be 10 years on staff in October.
So for people that aren't familiar with Pure Desire and necessarily their structure, Ted and Diane started the organization. And when they retired, a gentleman named Nick Stumbo came in, and he now runs the organization. So you started before Nick even came on board.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
I did. Yeah. So, it was crazy. I just remember being paralyzed in fear because I was only a year into, and all of my healing was self-led with the book. You know, it was like, I was the one leading the healing. We weren't in counseling. We were broke. And so when I did my first session, I was just paralyzed in fear. And my husband said, "I have never seen you like this before." And I was like, "I can't do this. I'm too scared. I'm unqualified. Do they not know? Like, I'm a mess. My past is a mess. I have no college education. Like, the only thing that qualifies me is my situation." And then I was reading through my Bible in one of my mornings, and it was Acts 4:13. And I was like, okay, they were astounded and amazed because these individuals had been with Jesus and they didn't have any special teaching. And so I just kind of held on to that and just said, "Okay, God, whatever door you want me to keep walking through, I will." But I have had so many anxiety attacks, you know, since then, just like, "I can't do this." And he's like, "Yes, you can." And just pushed me out. So, and then the truth of like, navigating the ups and downs with a real life person who struggles. My husband, he's not perfect. He has his relapses, and having teenagers where it's like, okay, when one of them started stumbling into porn, there's so many times where I'm like, I'm not even qualified to be working here, to be leading, to be having a voice. And I have to bring myself back to, I'm just teaching people how to be their own whole person, regardless of what everybody else around them does. I mean, I can't control anybody, and I want to live, you know, out my story and what God wants me to do, whether people are in their up or they're down.
Yeah. Well, and you know, how many times do we feel unqualified to do something that God has called us to do? That's clearly been put in front of us and placed in our heart. And, you know, this specific calling on our life because of the story that He's allowed us to walk. It's like, okay, He's equipped you with the wisdom because of your experience and what you've walked through. And how many times does he do that with people where we're like, no, I shouldn't be doing this. There are people far more qualified to be doing something like this. And he says, you are qualified if I say you're qualified, So that's amazing. Well, I commend you on just continuing to just walk through the next door and the next thing. Recently, Pure Desire announced their move to their headquarters, moving from Oregon to Tennessee. And so I know that there's been a lot with that. So relocating and so many changes and so many hurdles. But I have to say, from somebody who serves on the board of Pure Desire, to a staff member, how much I appreciate you and what you do for the organization and your heart and your passion for just the entire ministry, and not necessarily the ministry because it's Pure Desire, but the ministry for healing and for wholeness for women and for couples, and to just walk alongside even in people's brokenness, because we're never going to be perfect. And so, that's what we're called to do.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Obviously, it's like, I'm in it. I'm in the rapid river.
Yeah.
Okay, God, are you really going to hold it back as we cross this river into the promised land? And so, yeah, it makes me teary to just have that encouragement and continue to follow what I know God is leading us. There's so many people out there just still hurting. And I think the thing that qualifies me, and I see others most, is that we're willing to say something. There's so many people who are unwilling to talk about it out of either their own shame or feeling unqualified or being told they could never do that or lack of knowledge. I don't know, but there's not as big of a number of people who are just willing to say things. And so I continue to do that. But then still have to say, God, you gotta help me here, because being kind of on the front lines is a little scary. You're like, I want to talk about this stuff, and I want to make sure that other wives and moms and sisters and daughters do not have to experience what we did when we were searching for help and hope.
Yeah. Yeah. Ashley, what would you tell a listener who is feeling kind of like you were in the church and like you have in the church, that your checkered past or whatever bad decisions you've made or bad things that have happened to you, make you, discarded and not valued? And that's obviously a lie, but that is what so many people feel, probably in and out of the church, quite honestly, that things that have happened to them or choices that they've made and the place that they find themselves having less value than maybe somebody else. And so what would you tell a listener that's feeling the way that you did so early on?
Well, I was just talking to somebody about this the other day, because it is it's a common fear. It's a common thought, with people who are struggling or have had pain. And, we go back to the Bible for our guidance, and I just don't see a lot of people, almost none, that don't have problems. It's kind of like, okay, show me a person that God used to do something amazing and wonderful who did not have struggles. I mean, it's very, very hard to find. And the majority of God's, biblical heroes in the Bible have a very checkered past. And so it's mostly our perception of what we think people want or the ideas of others put on us that keeps us stuck. And I remember, like I said, I didn't come from a church background. So I'm like street girl trying to do church. And I'm like, what is this Bible college? Like, I don't know what any of the terms are or anything like that. Like, how do you do that? That's a thing. And I still find myself, even at 40 years old, I'm like, what are you talking about? I am just like, the structure of things confused me, but I remember saying, okay, I hear that we should share the gospel and do these things. And I kept trying to find corners of the world or corners of the ministry to plug myself into. And I still always felt a little bit like a fraud. And it wasn't until I just stopped and laid out all of my brokenness and what I was really struggling with to God and then to others, where I felt like I could just live fully in my own skin and living out exactly how God created me to be. And then the more I did that, the more I realized that's what people want. And they keep coming back saying, how do I do that too? And so it's scary, but you can do it. I mean, God, there's so many women who are thinking the same thing. And we're all here to tell you that we've been there. We know how it feels. And there's so much joy in just being who you are with your past. It actually sometimes can be more attractive to others, knowing that you've been through other, hard things like they have.
Yeah, for sure. Well, before we wrap up, we're going to put Pure Desire's website in the show notes so people can find PD. What specifically do you do at Pure Desire? A lot. I know you do a lot.
So I oversee the women's groups. And so anything women's church groups, women's online, the content we put out for women. I'm always heavily involved in that. I co-host the podcast that we do with women's topics. It's unfiltered, real talk about sex and love, and people just send in their questions. We answer them. Like you said, I've co-authored Betrayal and Beyond and Unraveled, which is for our women who struggle, and then Authentically You, which is for our single younger women, and then the new book, Girl Talk. I just help connect with churches and really try to empower churches to say, this does not have to be a big, huge, daunting task. Just start somewhere. Yeah. And we have tools to come alongside you. You don't even have to have all the bandwidth. We will help you, and we'll start wherever you're at. So those are some of my main tasks at Pure Desire.
Awesome. So we'll put Pure Desire in the show notes so people can find that and connect with you or the ministry, especially for women who are seeking betrayal and beyond. We have had several people on the podcast over the last several seasons who have been connected to Pure Desire. Nick actually has been on the podcast, but it's always good, I just think, to have continued reminders so people can reach out, or if men actually listen to this podcast frequently, and so they can reach out as well. But I also want to be able to put on, where can we find your book, Girl Talk, for those moms who are like, yes, I need this to talk to my little girls?
Yeah. So it's just at puredesire.org. And then you can click on the store page and it will be right there. And it's written for like middle school age and up. Okay. And so I say either moms and daughters or even like youth leaders can do it with a group of youth girls as long as they get parent permission. Okay. But it's got all of our really good Pure Desire tools and teaching condensed down into a little 8-week guide with some discussion questions and implementing the tools at the end of each week. Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Ashley. I appreciate you. I appreciate your vulnerability and just your willingness to hop on here and chat about your story a little bit. Yeah. I mean, it's always like, really? You want to just hear my story? I do. All? That doesn't seem very special, but I really appreciate the time and being able to come on here and share. Thank you so much for joining us for today's conversation on the Stories Unveiled podcast. We would love it if you would leave us a rating or review. If you would like to learn more about Stories Unveiled and our events, go to storiesunveiledconference.com or follow us on Facebook or Instagram at storiesunveiled_. The Stories Unveiled podcast is created in partnership with KTSY and Barefoot Media Ministries. For more encouragement and other podcasts, visit ktsy.org. Have an incredible day and go live unveiled.